The space station Horizon's Edge floated in the darkness between two worlds. It was neutral ground, a place where humans and aliens met to talk business and sign treaties. Lieutenant stood at his post near the docking bay, watching the ship approach through the observation window. He was 28 years old, with tired eyes and a body covered in old scars. 6 years in the military had taught him many things: patience, discipline, how to smile when someone insulted him. That last skill would be useful today. They were coming. Had read the briefing files a dozen times. There were tall beings with silver skin that glowed softly in the dark. They lived for hundreds of years and considered themselves the most advanced species in the galaxy. They looked at humans the way humans looked at insects. Interesting, perhaps, but not important. Today, Princess of the Empire was arriving for trade negotiations, had been assigned to her security detail. His commanding officer had called it an honor, knew better. This was punishment for speaking out of turn at a briefing last month. Nobody wanted this job. The docking bay doors opened with a hiss of pressure. Guards entered first, their silver armor reflecting the station lights. They moved like water, smooth and silent. Then came the princess. Was tall, even for her silver skin was marked with patterns of soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Her eyes were large and violet, and when they swept across the human welcoming party, they held nothing but cold dismissal. She was beautiful. She was also clearly disgusted to be here. The human ambassador stepped forward with a practiced smile. "Princess, welcome to Horizon's Edge. We are honored by your presence." Did not smile back. "I am here because my mother commands it. Let us not pretend this is anything more than duty." Her voice was musical but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. The ambassador's smile flickered but held. "Of course. Please, allow me to introduce your security detail. Lieutenant will be responsible for your safety during your stay." Stepped forward and gave a respectful bow. "Princess, I will do everything in my power to ensure your comfort and security." Looked at him for the first time. Her violet eyes moved slowly from his face to his worn uniform to the small scars on his hands. Her expression did not change, but could feel her judgment like a weight on his shoulders. "A human guard," she said. "How quaint. I suppose my mother wanted to remind me of humility." She turned away without waiting for a response. "Show me to my quarters. I wish to rest before the negotiations begin." Kept his face neutral. He had endured worse insults from drill sergeants. This was nothing. The following days were long and difficult. Princess made no effort to hide her contempt for humans. She complained about the food, the air quality, the lighting, and the noise. She dismissed presence with waves of her hand and spoke about him as if he were furniture. "Must he follow me everywhere?" she asked her attendant one evening. "His presence is tiresome. Humans have such a smell." Stood 3 meters away. He heard every word. He said nothing. Other security officers would have requested a transfer. Some might have filed complaints. Simply did his job. He checked every corridor before the princess walked through it. He tested every meal for poison. He stood outside her door for 12-hour shifts without complaint. On the 5th night, noticed something strange. He was making his usual patrol of the corridor outside the princess's quarters when he saw a tiny crack in the wall panel. It was small, barely visible, but something about it made him stop. He pressed his hand against the metal and felt a faint vibration. Microfractures. The kind that happen when someone drilled into a station wall very carefully over many days. His blood went cold. He had seen this before during his training. This was sabotage. Someone had weakened the hull near the princess's quarters. A small explosion, a single spark, and this entire section would tear open to the vacuum of space. He reached for his communicator to call for backup. He never got the chance. The wall exploded outward. Felt the blast lift him off his feet and throw him against the opposite wall. Alarms screamed. Red emergency lights flooded the corridor, and beneath it all he heard the terrible sound of rushing air, the station's atmosphere bleeding into the void. Pushed himself up. His ears were ringing. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. Through the smoke and chaos, he saw the princess's door had been blown open. Inside was on the floor, stunned and bleeding from a wound on her arm. The hole in the wall was growing. Metal groaned and twisted as the vacuum pulled at everything. Loose objects flew toward the breach. The princess's silk robes fluttered wildly as the air tried to drag her toward death. Did not think. He did not calculate odds or consider consequences. He simply moved. He threw himself through the doorway and wrapped his body around the princess. His back faced the breach. Shrapnel and debris tore into his flesh as he shielded her with everything he had. He felt metal pierce his shoulder, his ribs, his spine. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced. But he did not let go. With one arm holding against his chest, used his free hand to drag them both toward the emergency bulkhead. His fingers found the manual release lever. He pulled with all his remaining strength. The bulkhead slammed down, sealing the breach. The terrible wind stopped. The corridor fell silent except for the wailing alarms. Collapsed on top of the princess, his body a broken shield of blood and torn flesh. He could not feel his legs. He could not feel much of anything except a strange, cold peace. He had done his job. She was safe. Princess pushed herself up beneath him. Her violet eyes were wide with shock as she looked at the human who had covered her. His back was destroyed. She could see bone through the ruin of his uniform. Blood pooled around them both. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you?" But could not answer. His eyes were already closed. His breathing was shallow and weak. By the time the rescue teams arrived 4 minutes later, they found the princess untouched, still cradled in the arms of a dying man who had no reason to save her. And for the first time in her long life, Princess felt something she did not understand. It felt like shame, opened his eyes to a world of soft light and strange sounds. He was lying in a bed that seemed to be made of warm water, though he was somehow dry. The ceiling above him glowed with gentle blue patterns that moved like clouds. The air smelled sweet, like flowers he had never encountered before. He tried to move and found that he could not. His body felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. "Do not try to rise," a voice said. "Your body is still healing." Turned his head slowly. A physician stood beside his bed, tall and silver-skinned, with marks of green light that pulsed along her arms. She was studying a floating display of symbols he could not read. "Where am I?" His voice came out as a rough whisper. "You are aboard the Eternal Grace, a medical vessel. You have been unconscious for 18 days. The physician's voice was clinical without emotion. "Your injuries were extensive: severed spine, ruptured organs, massive blood loss. By all understanding of human biology, you should have died within minutes." 18 days. Tried to process this information. He remembered the explosion, the breach, the terrible pain in his back. He remembered holding the princess. "The princess," he said, "is she?" "Princess is unharmed, thanks to you." The physician paused. Something flickered in her expression, surprise perhaps. "She has not left this room since you arrived. She sleeps in the chair by the window." Turned his head the other way. There, curled in a chair too small for her tall frame, was Princess. She was asleep, her silver skin dim, her violet eyes closed. She looked smaller somehow, younger. The coldness he had seen in her before was gone. She stirred as if sensing his gaze. Her eyes opened and met his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then rose from the chair and walked to his bedside. She moved carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal. When she reached him, she did something never expected. She knelt beside his bed and bowed her head. "I am sorry," she said. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual sharpness. "I treated you with cruelty. I dismissed you as nothing, and you repaid my contempt by giving your life for mine." Did not know what to say. He had never expected an apology. He had not saved her for gratitude. He had simply done what needed to be done. "It's my job," he managed. Shook her head. "No, what you did was beyond duty. I have studied the reports. You held on to consciousness for 11 minutes after your spine was severed. You sealed the bulkhead with hands that were already broken. No warrior could have done what you did. No one could have done what you did." She raised her head and saw something glistening in her violet eyes. Tears. The princess was crying. "You were dying," she continued. "The human doctors said there was nothing they could do. Your organs were failing one by one. So She stopped, struggling with the words. "I did something forbidden, something I cannot take back." Felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "What did you do?" "I gave you my blood." The words hung in the air between them. Did not understand their weight, but he could see it in her face. Whatever she had done, it was serious. "In my culture there is a ritual called," explained. "It is the sharing of blood between bonded mates. Our blood carries power. It can heal wounds that nothing else can heal, but it also creates a connection, a permanent bond." His mind worked slowly through the meaning. "You mean?" "I have claimed you," his voice broke. "Under law you are now bound to me and I to you. You are mine and I am yours until death separates us." She covered her face with her hands. "I did not think. I only wanted to save you, and now I have trapped you in something you never asked for." Stared at the ceiling. He should be angry, he thought. He should feel violated, manipulated, used. But when he searched his heart, he found none of those things. He found only a strange calm. "Princess," he said quietly. She looked up, her face wet with tears. "Are you all right? Were you hurt in the blast?" Blinked. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. Of all the things she had expected him to say, this was clearly not one of them. What?" "Your arm," said. "You were bleeding when I found you. Is it healed?" For a long moment, simply stared at him. Then slowly she began to laugh. It was a broken sound, half sob and half wonder. "Your spine was destroyed. Your life was taken from you. You have been bound to an alien princess without your consent, and you ask about my arm." Managed a small shrug, though it hurt. "You were injured. I wanted to know." Wiped her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more uncertain. "No male would have asked about they would have demanded reparations. They would have leveraged the bond for power and status. They would have seen me as a tool to be used." She shook her head slowly. "What manner of being are you?" Before he could answer, the door to the medical chamber slid open. An officer entered, his face tight with tension. He bowed to the princess but did not look at. "Your Highness, a message has arrived from the Queen herself." Went still. The soft warmth that had been building in her expression vanished, replaced by something cold and afraid. "Give it to me," she said. The officer handed her a small crystal that glowed with inner light, pressed it to her temple and closed her eyes. For several seconds, she did not move. Then the crystal fell from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking. "Princess," tried to sit up, but his body would not obey. "What is it? What did she say?" Turned to him slowly. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "My mother is coming," she swallowed hard. "She knows about the bond, she knows about you, and she is displeased." "What does that mean?" His violet eyes met his, and in them he saw genuine fear. "It means she will kill you to sever the bond. It is the only way to undo what I have done, and there is nothing, that can stop her." The cold weight in his stomach grew heavier. He had survived an explosion, a breached hull, and 18 days of death. Now, it seemed, his real trial was about to begin. And it was coming for him in the form of a queen. The fleet arrived 3 days later. Watched from the observation deck of Horizon's Edge as 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They were massive things, each one larger than the entire human station, their hulls gleaming with silver light. They moved into formation around the station like predators circling wounded prey. In the center of the fleet was the royal flagship, the Eternal Throne. It was the largest ship had ever seen, a floating palace of crystal and metal that seemed to glow from within. Queen Sora had arrived. The human diplomatic corps was in a state of panic, could see it in their faces as they rushed through the corridors, whispering urgently to each other. They had sent a fleet. This was not a diplomatic visit. This was a show of force. And at the center of it all was himself, a single human soldier who had accidentally become bound to a princess. He should have been terrified, but as he stood at the observation window, watching the massive ships hang in space like silver moons, he felt only a strange emptiness. He had already died once. The idea of dying again did not frighten him as much as it should have. What frightened him was the thought of facing her mother's wrath alone. Over the past 3 days, the princess had changed. The cold, dismissive woman he had first met was gone, replaced by someone uncertain and afraid. She had stayed by his side as he learned to walk again, helped by medical technology that had rebuilt his spine one molecule at a time. She had told him stories about her childhood, about the mother she both loved and feared. Queen Sora was ancient by any standard, over 800 years old. She had ruled the empire for 6 centuries, surviving wars, betrayals, and countless assassination attempts. She was wise and just said, but also utterly ruthless. She did what needed to be done, regardless of the cost. And right now, what needed to be done was eliminating the human who had accidentally bonded with her daughter. The Human Council has agreed to surrender you, an officer informed that afternoon. You will be transferred to the Queen's custody within the hour. Nodded, he had expected this. The human government was terrified of war with they would sacrifice one soldier to avoid conflict. He did not blame them. It was the logical choice. But did. Cowards, she spat when she heard the news. Spineless, pathetic cowards. They would throw away a man who saved one of their own, a man who nearly died protecting. Princess placed a gentle hand on her arm. It's all right. They are doing what they must. It is not all right, his voice cracked. You saved my life and now you will die for it. Smiled, though he did not feel like smiling. Then I will die with honor. There are worse fates. 1 hour later, was escorted to the main docking bay. The Queen's personal guard had come to collect him, 6 warriors in armor that seemed to drink the light around them. They moved with deadly grace, their hands resting on weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Walked between them without resistance. His uniform was clean and pressed, his wounds hidden beneath the fabric. He had shaved for the first time in weeks and combed his hair. If he was going to die, he would do so looking like a soldier. The docking bay doors opened onto the Queen's ship, was led through corridors of polished crystal, past gardens of glowing plants, past fountains that seemed to flow upward against gravity. Everything was beautiful and cold, like the inside of a diamond. Finally, he was brought to the throne room. It was vast, a chamber large enough to hold 1,000 people, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls were lined with nobles, their silver skin marked with patterns of every color. They watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to disgust. At the far end of the chamber, on a throne of living crystal, sat Queen Sora. She was the oldest had ever seen. Her silver skin was darker than the others, marked with centuries of scars that glowed with deep purple light. Her eyes were black, completely black, without iris or pupil, and they fixed on with an intensity that made his blood freeze. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence alone was enough to make every person in the room bow. Did not bow. A gasp ran through the assembled nobles. The guards beside him tensed, waiting for the order to strike him down. but simply stood, his back straight, his eyes meeting the Queen's without fear. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human." The Queen's voice filled the chamber like thunder. "My subjects have killed for lesser insults than the one you just gave me." "I mean no disrespect, your majesty," replied. His voice was calm, steady. "But I bow only to those who have earned my respect. You have come to kill me. That does not earn my respect." The nobles whispered furiously to each other. Some looked angry, others looked fascinated. No one had ever spoken to Queen Sara this way. The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, she rose from her throne and descended the steps toward him. She moved with the grace of a predator, each step deliberate and controlled. She stopped directly in front of him. Up close, could see the scars that covered her skin, hundreds of them, each one a story of survival. "You protected my daughter," she said quietly. "Why? She treated you with contempt. She dismissed you as nothing, yet you gave your life for her without hesitation." Met her black eyes without flinching. "Because she was in danger, that is all that mattered." "That is all that mattered," the Queen repeated. "Not glory, not reward, not the favor of a princess." "No." "Then you are either a saint or a fool." The Queen tilted her head, studying him like a scientist examining a strange specimen. "My advisors tell me you should have died within seconds of the explosion. Instead, you held on for 11 minutes. You sealed a bulkhead with broken hands and a severed spine. You refused to let go of my daughter even as your body was torn apart." She paused. "How?" Did not have a good answer, so he told the truth. "I don't know, your majesty. I just knew I couldn't let her die, so I didn't." The Queen was silent for a long time. The entire throne room held its breath. Then she spoke, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "You have spirit, human, more spirit than most of my own warriors. Very well, I will not kill you today." Relief flooded through, though he was careful not to show it. "Instead," the Queen continued, "you will face Aura, the trial of worth. It is the ancient test of our people, designed to separate the worthy from the worthless." Her black eyes gleamed. "No human has ever attempted it. None have survived even the first challenge." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for him. "Survive, human, and we will speak again. Fail, and you will die as you should have, in pieces forgotten by history." She turned and walked back to her throne. "The trial begins at dawn. Prepare yourself." And with that, fate was sealed. The proving grounds of the royal palace were older than human civilization. Stood at the entrance, looking up at walls of black stone that stretched toward a violet sky. The air was thin here, harder to breathe than he was used to. The gravity was slightly stronger, pulling at his legs and making every step an effort. Around him, thousands had gathered to watch. They filled the ancient stands, their silver skin catching the light of twin suns. Most of them had come to see the human fail, to see him broken, humiliated, destroyed. Did not care about them. He cared only about the trial ahead. An elder approached him, her skin marked with gold patterns that showed her high rank. She carried a scroll of glowing symbols that floated in the air beside her. "The trial of worth consists of 3 challenges," she announced, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the arena. "Each challenge tests a different aspect of the soul, strength, truth, purpose." She turned to, her expression neutral. "No human has ever completed the trial. Most do not survive the first challenge. Do you still wish to proceed?" Nodded, "I do." A murmur ran through the crowd. Somewhere in the stands, Princess watched with clenched fists and terrified eyes. Beside her sat Queen Sora, her black eyes fixed on the human below. The first challenge began. The Gauntlet of Blades was exactly what its name suggested, a long corridor lined with automated weapons that tracked movement. Spinning blades emerged from the walls. Energy beams swept across the floor. Dart launchers fired poison projectiles at anything that entered their range. Warriors passed through using their superior speed. Their reflexes were 4 times faster than humans. They could see the attacks coming and dodge before the weapons fired. Had no such advantage. He stood at the entrance to the gauntlet, watching the pattern of death that awaited him. The blades spun in seemingly random cycles. The beams swept back and forth without obvious timing. The darts flew too fast for human eyes to track. The crowd expected him to fail immediately. Many were already laughing. But did not move forward. Instead, he watched. He counted. He studied. For 5 full minutes, he stood completely still while the crowd grew restless and confused. Then, when he had memorized every pattern, every gap, every moment of safety, he began to move. He did not try to be fast. Speed would not save him. Instead, he moved with absolute precision, placing each foot exactly where it needed to be. When a blade swept toward him, he was already a centimeter beyond its reach. When an energy beam passed, he was already crouched beneath it. When darts flew, he was already behind the small columns that provided just enough cover. He did not escape unharmed. A blade caught his arm, opening a long cut. A dart grazed his shoulder. An energy beam scorched his back. But he kept moving, kept counting, kept surviving. And then, bleeding but alive, he stepped out the other end of the gauntlet. The crowd fell silent. No one had expected him to survive, let alone complete the challenge. Warriors trained for years before attempting the gauntlet. This human had done it through pure observation and willpower. Queen Sora leaned forward in her seat, her black eyes narrowing. The second challenge was different. Was led to a chamber of pure white light. In the center stood 3 judges, their minds connected through ancient technology. This was the weight of truth, a psychic trial where the subject's memories were laid bare for judgment. The judges would search his mind for cowardice, selfishness, deception. Any darkness in his soul would be exposed and used against him. Warriors sometimes went mad from the experience, their deepest shames revealed before the entire empire. Sat in the center of the chamber and closed his eyes. "Open your mind," the judges commanded. "Hide nothing." The invasion was immediate and overwhelming. Felt foreign thoughts tearing through his memories like hands ripping through paper. They saw everything. His entire life, from childhood to this moment, was exposed. They saw a boy growing up in poverty, his father gone, his mother working 3 jobs to keep food on the table. They saw him at 12 years old, taking his first job to help pay for his younger sister's school supplies. They saw him choosing the military not for glory or power, but because it was the only way to earn enough money to send his sister to university. They saw him saving lives during disasters, carrying wounded soldiers through enemy fire, holding the hand of a dying friend who had no one else. They saw him being passed over for promotions because he refused to take credit for others' work. They saw him being punished for speaking the truth when lies would have been easier. And through all of it they found no malice, no hidden agenda, no secret cruelty. They found only a tired man who kept choosing to help people who never thanked him. A man who expected nothing and asked for nothing. A man who had given everything he had and never complained about the cost. The judges from his mind, their expressions shaken. In the stands, Princess was weeping openly. Even Queen Sora's mask had cracked, showing something that might have been surprise. The eldest judge spoke, her voice trembling. "In 800 years I have never seen a soul so clean. This human carries more honor than most warriors I have judged." The crowd did not know how to react. Some began to whisper, others sat in stunned silence. The third challenge was the most difficult. Was brought to a dark chamber where a single figure waited in chains. It was a male, his silver skin marked with the symbols of a criminal. Recognized him from the investigation reports. This was the assassin who had sabotaged the station, who had tried to kill Princess. A blade was placed in his hand. "This is the final choice," Queen Sara announced from her place above. "Before you stands the one who nearly killed you and my daughter. He is guilty of treason and attempted murder. The law demands his death." Her black eyes fixed on, "Kill him and prove your worth as a warrior." The crowd leaned forward, hungry for blood. This was the climax they had been waiting for. The human would complete his transformation, prove himself worthy through violence. Looked at the blade in his hand. It was beautiful, perfectly balanced, designed to kill with a single stroke. The assassin before him stared back with defiant eyes, expecting death. Slowly, deliberately, dropped the blade. It clattered against the stone floor, the sound echoing through the silent chamber. "No," he said. The crowd erupted in outrage. Nobles shouted accusations of cowardice. Warriors demanded his immediate execution. The assassin himself looked confused, as if he could not understand what was happening. Queen Sara raised her hand, and silence fell. "You refuse the final trial." Her voice was cold as ice. "You refuse to prove your worth." Looked up at her, his eyes steady. "I am not a warrior," he said. "I am a protector. I do not take lives to prove my value. I save them." He gestured at the chained assassin. "This man tried to kill the princess. He should face justice, but justice is not the same as revenge, and murder is not the same as strength." He stepped back from the fallen blade. "I will not become a killer just to satisfy your traditions. If that means I fail your trial, then I fail, but I will fail with my soul intact." The silence stretched on and on. Then slowly, Queen Sara rose from her seat. Every eye in the arena followed her as she descended to the chamber floor. She walked past the guards, past the judges, past the chained assassin, until she stood directly before. Her black eyes studied him for a long moment. "You are the first to reject the final trial in 800 years, she said quietly. "The last one who refused to take that blade was me." She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "The trial is complete. The human has passed." And for the first time since his arrival, allowed himself to breathe. The throne room was empty now, cleared of nobles and guards and curious onlookers. Only 3 people remained beneath the crystal ceiling, Princess and Queen Sara herself. The queen sat not on her throne but on the steps below it, her ancient body relaxed in a way had not seen before. The terrifying ruler who had commanded a fleet was gone. In her place was a woman who looked very, very tired. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the steps beside her. "We have much to discuss." Sat, settled on his other side, her silver hand finding his and squeezing gently. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the queen sighed, and 8 centuries of weariness seemed to flow out with her breath. "The trial of worth was never meant to be passed through violence," she said quietly. "The final challenge, the blade, the prisoner, it is a test of corruption. We give power to the subject and see if they abuse it." She shook her head slowly. "Every male offered that blade has taken it. They saw it as their right, their reward for surviving the earlier trials. They killed without hesitation, without thought." She turned to look at, her black eyes unreadable. "I was tested 812 years ago. I stood where you stood, with a blade in my hand and an enemy in chains, and I made the same choice you made. I refused." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "My mother called me weak. My brothers called me unfit to rule, but I understood something they did not." "What?" asked. "That true strength is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to choose not to." The queen rose and walked to a window that looked out over the glowing city below. "I have ruled this empire for 600 years. I have made many hard choices, ordered many deaths, sacrificed much for my people, but I have never forgotten that lesson. Killing is easy. Restraint is hard." She turned back to face him. "You understand this. You understood it before you ever took the trial. That is why you interest me." Felt the weight of her attention like a physical pressure. "Your Majesty, I am just a soldier. I am nothing special." "You are wrong." The queen walked toward him, her steps slow and deliberate. "I have watched you since the moment you arrived on that station. I watched you endure my daughter's cruelty without complaint. I watched you save her without thought for yourself. I watched you refuse to hide when you knew I was coming to kill you." She stopped directly before him. "And I watched you survive a trial designed for beings 4 times your strength, pass a psychic examination that has broken warriors with centuries of training, and reject the final challenge despite knowing it might mean your death." Her voice dropped. "You are not nothing special. You are extraordinary." Squeezed hand harder. He could feel her tension, her uncertainty about what was coming next. The queen seemed to sense it too. She glanced at her daughter with something that might have been affection. "Bonded you in desperation without thought for consequences. Under our law, she has claimed you as her mate, but she is young and she acted out of guilt rather than love." The queen paused. "I am old. I have not acted out of desperation in centuries. Everything I do with full knowledge of its meaning." She reached out and took his free hand in both of hers. Her skin was warm, almost hot, and he could feel the pulse of ancient power beneath it. "I claim you, not as a consort to a princess, but as consort to the crown. You will stand beside me, and through you, our people will learn what true strength means." The words hung in the air like lightning frozen in place. Stared at her. His mind struggled to process what she had just said. The queen of the entire empire, was claiming him, not killing him, claiming him. "Mother," his voice was shocked but not angry, "you swore you would never take another consort. You said." "I said many things." The queen did not look away from. "I said them because I never expected to find someone worthy. In 3 centuries, no one has proven themselves to me. Not one noble, not one warrior, not one scholar." Her grip tightened on his hand. "And then a human soldier, a man my own daughter dismissed as nothing, showed me more honor and courage in 3 days than I have seen in 300 years. She released his hand and stepped back. "I will not force you. Unlike my daughter's bond, this claim requires your consent. You may refuse. You may return to your human world and live out your life in peace. I will break's bond and you will be free." Looked at, her violet eyes were wide, uncertain. She was not jealous, he realized. She was afraid of losing him, one way or another. He looked at the queen. She stood tall and proud, but beneath the ancient power he saw something else: loneliness, hope, vulnerability carefully hidden behind centuries of control. He thought about his life: a forgotten soldier, a dismissed protector, a man who had spent years giving everything to people who never thanked him. He had expected nothing and received nothing. That had been his existence. And now 2 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy wanted him, not for his strength, not for his status, but for his heart. "I need time to think," he said. The queen nodded, and there was respect in her eyes. "Of course, take as long as you need." Walked alone through the palace gardens. The plants here glowed with inner light, casting soft shadows across paths of white stone. Fountains sang with water that sparkled like liquid diamonds. Above, unfamiliar stars wheeled through an alien sky. It was beautiful, strange and terrifying and beautiful. He thought about Earth, his small apartment, his sister, now a doctor, who called him once a month when she remembered, his commanding officers who had never learned his name, the station corridor where he had nearly died. He thought about who had been cruel and was now kind, about Queen Sara who had been terrifying and was now, hopeful. He thought about what it meant to be claimed, to belong somewhere, to matter to someone. All his life he had protected others. He had given and given and given, asking nothing in return. It was who he was. It was all he knew. But here, now, someone was offering to protect him, to value him, to see him as more than a tool or a servant or a disposable resource. Could he accept that? Could he let himself be seen? He stood for a long time under the alien stars, wrestling with a choice that would define the rest of his life. Then slowly, he turned and walked back to the throne room. The queen and the princess were waiting where he had left them. They looked up as he entered, their expressions carefully controlled but their eyes betraying their anxiety. Stopped before them. "I will stay," he said. The queen's mask cracked. Something that looked almost like joy flickered in her black eyes. "But not because you command it," continued. "Because someone has to remind you that power is not everything. Someone has to show your people that strength comes from kindness, not cruelty. Someone has to stand beside you and tell you the truth when everyone else is too afraid." He met her gaze without flinching. "Apparently that someone is me. So yes, I accept your claim, but I will not be a decoration or a symbol. I will be your equal or I will be nothing." For a long moment the queen was silent. Then she laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and surprised and genuine. It echoed through the throne room like music, and the guards at the door exchanged shocked glances. No one had heard Queen Sora laugh in decades. "Equal," she said, still smiling. "Very well, you will be my equal, and may the stars help anyone who underestimates you." The treaty between humans, and was signed 1 week later. It was the most favorable agreement humanity had ever achieved with an alien species. Trade routes opened. Technology was shared. Barriers that had stood for centuries began to crumble. And at the center of it all stood, wearing robes of silver and black, the scars on his back visible through the thin fabric. He stood at the queen's side as her consort, the first human ever to hold such a position in the empire. After the ceremony, a human ambassador named Park approached him. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a clever smile. "How does it feel?" she asked, her voice barely hiding her amazement, "being claimed by a queen?" Looked at Sora, who watched him from across the room with ancient, knowing eyes. At who had become something like a sister, her earlier cruelty transformed into fierce protectiveness. At the empire that had once dismissed his species as primitive and now looked to him as an example. He shrugged. "Feels like I finally got a promotion." Laughed. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the galaxy continued to turn, unaware that its future had been changed by a single human soldier who refused to stop protecting people, even when those people were trying to kill him. Some called it stupidity, some called it stubbornness. Simply called it doing his job. And now, his job had gotten a lot more interesting.